Good morning. This is Jack with Pete Milidnik, and welcome to One Poem, a production of Lee County Podcast. We thank you for joining us this morning. And Pete, could you introduce our poem today?
Yes, Jack. Today's poem is titled North Korean Workers at a Chinese Seafood Factory, and it's by Robbi Nester.
Okay, so let me go ahead and give a quick reading of it, and then we can get into the meat of the poetry. Once they were the tallest and most comely women in their villages, but now they are faceless in maroon uniforms and masks, white rubber boots, not allowed to chat or sing or stop to flex their aching hands, numb from the cold or raise their mask. They didn't choose to leave their homes and come here, were sent to process seafood, serve as sex workers at their foremen's parties, locked into dorms at night, because any one of them could be a spy. They dare not say their names, tell the others how the dampness haunts their dreams. The penetrating stink of shrimp entrails stalks them everywhere, as does the static stutter of fluorescent lights, blinking out in SOS no one will ever heed. There's nothing human in this place except the smell of sweat and fear, dry tongues swelling in their mouths. No wonder they are silent, eyes lowered, hiding what they feel, that they can feel at all. So there it is.
Thank you, Jack. 16 lines, fairly long lines, approximately the same length. Maybe our listeners/viewers could get a glimpse of how this poem looks on the page.
Okay.
Can people see that, maybe?
Yeah, a little bit.
Put it a little closer.
Yeah.
Just so people can get a look at the form of the poem. And I was not able to get a copy of the photograph of these women in the factory into my notes, but it's after an anonymous photograph, and that photograph is from an article by Ian Urbina in the New Yorker from February 25th, 2024, and the article is called Inside North Korea's Forced Labor Program. Had a little typo on North there, but nothing's perfect. Although this poem, I think, really hits the mark as far as what the poet wants to do. I think she's very successful, and the first things I thought of were that in nature, in its nature, or from the subject matter, I'll put the poem is expository. Like an article, it tells, it informs the reader, it informs them of what? The terrible conditions that these women labor under. And the other word that came to my mind is empathy. If there were no empathy, the whole tone of the poem would be changed, where a different writer might just want to be objective about what they're showing and telling. Just the way this poem is worded is very subjective, and the speaker is very sympathetic or how do you say it? Empathizes with the plight of these women, and those are the first two things that came to mind: empathy and exposition.
Don't you also think that this has to be pretty much an imaginative piece of work? I mean, even though it was an acrostic type of poetry, you had a photo to go off of. Still, you still had to have this element of the imagination playing into it.
Yeah, certainly you do. And Robbi Nester seems to really bring the factory to life.
I think that's one of the important elements is that as we read the poetry, we can start building the image of the factory in our heads, the factory processing line, and how these workers actually have to work in that environment.
And something else, Jack, I have written here, not to read off these notes, that's the thing not to do, but I have that the poem makes us aware of the here and now of slavery. This is happening
right now
at a Chinese seafood factory right now.
As in contemporary time, this is happening in our age. There is still evil in the world, evil that exploits the human nature, the humanity of individuals. So, again, this is an underlying theme that is part of the poetry, I think. You mentioned earlier something about this being something of a depressing poem, but also an illuminating poem. Would you like to discuss that?
Yeah, the topic itself is depressing, I think, again, because of its very nature. I mean, really, the topic is slavery. It's a poem about the here and now of slavery, and it makes one think of Martin Luther King's comment that injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. Yeah, this horrible thing is going on right now. That's depressing to some people, to people who might care, might want to see it changed. But the topic is depressing, but the poem is not. The poem is illuminating. I have here, somewhat self-consciously probably in my notes, I said that the poem shimmers with vitality, but I will own that. I think it does. The poem itself is vital and in that sense very much alive when it's transmitted from poet to reader. So a call for change, a call for
again,
action.
it's the exposition, if you will, or the expose of the reality of how certain class structures allow people to have one class of people to have power over another class of people, such as, for example, the Communist Party in China rules China, and it establishes of who works where. There's no freedom, there's no real choice. They collaborate with North Korea, who is also a communist state, who also has their own communist party, who exploit their own population for political and economic gain. And we see that on the page, don't we?
Sure. You see women hard at work and realizing that the profit from that work is going to go elsewhere. It's sure not going to go to them.
But isn't it also, they're not there by choice?
Oh no! I mean the fact, I won't say it, idea, the fact of their captivity is strongly emphasized. And I wanted to get into some of the specifics of the poem, but when I first started thinking about it, the two E words, empathy and exposition, or you could reverse them whatever order, came to mind, but to take a look at some of these lines that suggest so strongly the captivity, that the forced labor aspect, the slavery aspect here, too. Would you like me to?
Please.
Okay. So, okay. In line 1. Well, we put it this way. Let me preface it this way. There's a footnote about an article from the New Yorker magazine. The primary language unit for the article is the sentence. The primary language unit for this poem is the line. While the poem has standard punctuation, the primary, it's written, to me, as a reader, I see it as written in lines as opposed to sentences. And in line 1, you've got this superlative, the tallest. And in line 2, now that's the tallest and most comely women in their villages once. Now, contrast, in antithetical to tallest, we have faceless. And you think of self-esteem. You think of the concept of being somebody, as in contrast to feeling like a nobody. These opposites, and they're suggested in tallest and faceless. Faceless in maroon uniforms and masks. We're going to take away your individuality. We're going to take away your pride, your sense of self-esteem, everything. And then you've got these, put things in the poems. Readers can see things. We have the uniforms, the masks, and the rubber boots in line 3, and just this. The sense of being restricted, forced, not allowed to chat or sing or even stop to flash. She doesn't have even in here, but I sense that word, stop to flex their aching hands, numb from the cold. People who have worked under such conditions could probably really understand how these restrictions apply in such a factory. Somebody's watching you, and you better not stop and linger, or you're going to suffer the consequences. Not allowed to stop to flex their aching hands. I mean, come on, we got to turn out the profit here. And you sense the cold, the lack of choice. They didn't choose this, sent to processed food. What else? Their individuality, even the life in their eyes has been taken away, obscured by uniforms and masks, the freedom to choose taken away. By day, forced to process seafood, and when that's over, you can be a sex worker. We'll continue the exploitation even at a deeper level, at a level that violates even more. I mean, and if you have any kind of empathy, you're thinking, how shameful, It's a strongly emotive poem, Yeah, it's an idea poem, but it's maybe more than that, a feelings poem, too. Wants you to feel, It wants us to think and feel. It wants to engage the head and the heart, and I think it does pretty successfully. Okay, now you're going to be a sex worker. We're going to violate your whole body that way, and then lock you up in the dorms. And really, after you're up the next day, you're going to be pretty much locked in the factory, either literally or just by the norms, by the management's behavioral norms that they set. And you won't have your bodies are not yours, and you don't have any friends. I mean, this is a cold, cruel reality. Because if you try to make a friend, you never know who is going to be the spy implanted among you and go tell people, and they'll get your family back in North Korea. All of this is suggested, from the word spy. Any one of them could be a spy, so tell your names. And then in the drudgery of being in the factory never leaves. The dampness haunts their dreams. The penetrating stink of shrimp entrails. And these images that, well, as all images do, they engage our senses, our sense of taste and smell. And right at the end there, the swelling in their mouths. But what else? In a sense, they never leave the factory. The dampness haunts their dream. As the stink of the fish entrails stays with them. The glaring of the fluorescent lights. Robbi has she prepares us for the lights with the static and stutter, that hyphenated qualifier, as does the static and stutter of the lights, which sets up the SOS. When I think of an SOS, I think of a ship at sea signaling an SOS with a light. They're far out. They're in the darkness. The distance, the isolation of these women. The SOS no one will heed. Ironically, if you will, the speaker wants the reader to heed, hoping the reader will heed. Nothing human in this place. Poems are written with lines. The only human aspects, the smell of sweat and fear, the dry tongues who can even taste the fear. But to get down toward the very end, I believe it's line 15, the next to last line. We have the mouths at the beginning and eyes at the very end of that line. The word eyes here is a synecdoche where the part represents the whole. And the eyes represent the whole person, their whole being. So when you get to the last line. The line 15 is enjammed or run on. The thought process is completed in the very last line, but it's not only the eyes that are lowered, the whole person hiding what they feel. No wonder that they can feel it all. That even that powerful end is dependent on what comes before it, the beginning of the last sentence in the poem, and the beginning of the next to last line. Here again, I emphasize the contrast between the line and the sentence. Yes, this poem is written in sentences, but primarily in lines. Even though the organization is, I believe the word is stickic, there's no white space in it. It looks a little like a paragraph, but it looks different from a paragraph because it's not I'm going to say it's not what's called a prose poem,
right,
but it's just a poem that happens to have long lines of relatively even lengths. But here again, like any good poem, I've never seen another one quite like it.
Right. So, the form is not necessarily essential to the poetry, but it does add to the sense that this might be something that you might come across in your newspaper or in a magazine or something like that. Would you agree with that?
Certainly, yeah. It adds to that.
Again, it gives a commonplace. The story itself is, well, it's more common than we would like to admit. But our encounter with it could be on a screen, it could be in a newspaper, it could be in a magazine. Obviously, they have stories like in the New Yorker and the New York Post and so on and so forth that talk about this stuff, but ultimately it just seems to glide in under the surface of everything. Other stories come up and become more important. And these women, their stories get pushed underneath. And it's not something that is just happening. This is not a new thing. This has been going on for, well, you could argue that it's been going on since the first clan of people found another clan of people and started a fight with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this idea of slavery, of enforced labor, exploitation of another human being, it's an old story, but this poem puts it into a modern perspective, into a contemporary language. And again, is this going to be a story that once again gets pushed underneath everything else, or are we going to see that the SOS is still blinking?
Yeah, that's so important, that SOS image toward the end of the poem. And it seems to me to be very much a call to action. I'm making the poet as messenger, to society, to the free world, if you will, whatever that means, to do something to change this condition that, going back to Martin Luther King, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. This condition of human existence that's a blight on humanity. And I think that Robbi Nester does a very good job with that here. It's a spare poem. By that I mean there's no extra adjectives or qualifiers getting in the way. Her syntax is pretty direct. You could say even simple and direct, simple in the sense of spare, but also very emotionally charged,
Yes.
throughout the poem, too.
I would tend to agree with
Hard
that.
hitting, yeah.
So,
In a way that is very different from many of the poems we've talked about, the six,
Yes.
I believe, that have preceded
Yes.
this. And I like going for diversity, and this one is, well, they're all different, well, this one, why not mention it a little bit because it's relevant in our series. We're not just doing this one time, but this is part of the series, and we urge you to see them all. This is a little bit like the Audre Lorde poem,
Right.
Power.
very much so.
Yeah, also a call for change. Also meeting cruelty head on. Because let's face it, I think there's some cruelty here. Certainly there is. Meeting exploitation head on.
Right. So, final thoughts. What would you say your final thoughts on this Miss Nester's poem is?
I would urge anybody who's seeing and hearing us to look up the poem and read it. Sometimes people will say, "Oh, poems are hard to understand." For me, this is not a hard poem to understand. That's not saying it's simple. I said simple and direct before, but I only meant in regard to the word order. Taken as a whole, the poem is, I think, very complex and deep. The surface of it is just very direct and urgent, if you will. To me, it seems as really any poem should seem as if it had to be written. I would urge people to read it to enrich your own life. Read it to expand your knowledge of not only the community outside your door, but the community of humankind. Because this poem certainly suggests to us, I think, what's happening in this factory somewhere in China is also happening in North Korea, might be happening in South Korea, might be happening on the continent of Africa, might be happening on the North American continent. We live in southeast New Mexico. We don't live too far from Juarez, Mexico. And I remember a few years ago reading an essay by somebody about women, as a matter of fact, in a factory. It might have been in Juarez or very close to Juarez, a similar situation. And so Robbi Nester adds her poem to this, what's the word I'm looking for, collection of poems, not a literal collection, but to the poems that are a cry and a call for social change, and very worthwhile spending time with this poem and reading it and reading it again to simply get a sense of not only what she says, but how she says it.
Right. Well, thank you, Pete. I appreciate your insights on this. Thank you for joining us this morning for Lee County Pod. One poem. North Korean workers in a Chinese factory. It's a very unique poem by Robbi Nester, and we appreciate her allowing us to discuss her poetry today. Once again, thank you for joining us, and until next time, this is Jack Campbell for One Poem, Lee County Pod.